The birthday cake was still warm in my hands when my daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "Pack your bags, old hag. From today, you won't live with us anymore." My son David just nodded like a bobblehead doll and said absolutely nothing. So I stepped outside, made one phone call, and exactly 1 hour later, that shrew was homeless. If you're reading this story, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're reading from. I love connecting with people who understand family drama. But let me back up and tell you how we got to this delicious moment of justice, because honey, this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. 3 years ago, I was Margaret Thompson, recently widowed at 65, sitting in my lawyer's office thinking my world had ended. My Robert had been gone for 6 months, and the loneliness was eating me alive like termites in old wood. That's when my son David called with what seemed like a lifeline. "Mom, Jessica and I have been talking," he said, his voice carrying that careful tone he used when he was about to ask for something. "Why don't you come live with us? Tyler would love having Grandma around, and we could all help each other out." I should have known better. Jessica had never liked me from day one. Not since David brought her home 15 years ago with her perfectly straight blonde hair and her way of making everything sound like a question, even when it wasn't. "So, Margaret, you're really going to wear that to the restaurant?" But grief makes you stupid, and I was drowning in it. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that cut like broken glass every time I turned a corner. So I said yes. Looking back now, I realized that was exactly what she was counting on. The first few months weren't terrible. Tyler was 5 then, all gap-toothed grins and endless energy, and he genuinely seemed happy to have me there. David worked long hours at his accounting firm. Jessica worked part-time at some boutique downtown, and I became the built-in babysitter and housekeeper, which, let's be honest, I didn't mind at first. Keeping busy helped with the grief, and Tyler was a sweetheart. But Jessica had a way of making even my helpfulness feel like an intrusion. "Oh, Margaret, you didn't have to reorganize my spice cabinet," she'd say, with that smile that never reached her eyes. "I had my own system." Or, "I appreciate you doing Tyler's laundry, but could you maybe not use so much fabric softener? It's just not how we usually do things." Death by 1,000 paper cuts. That's what it was. Each comment small enough that complaining would make me look petty, but together they built a wall between us higher than the Berlin Wall. David, bless his oblivious heart, never noticed. He'd come home exhausted, kiss Jessica hello, ruffle Tyler's hair, give me a quick hug, and disappear into his home office or in front of the TV. Family harmony achieved, as far as he was concerned. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The real trouble didn't start until Jessica realized something that would change everything. The thing about living with someone is that eventually their true colors bleed through like cheap dye in hot water. For Jessica, that bleeding started about 6 months after I moved in. It began with small things. She'd forget to tell me about Tyler's school events until the last minute, then act surprised when I couldn't make it. She'd cook dinner for 3, and then look genuinely shocked when I appeared in the kitchen. "Oh, I thought you were eating with your book club tonight." I wasn't stupid. I knew what she was doing. But Robert had raised David to avoid conflict at all costs, and confronting Jessica would put David in the middle. So I swallowed my pride and tried to make myself smaller, hoping she'd eventually warm up to me. Biggest mistake of my life. See, Jessica wasn't just cold. She was strategic. Every act of casual cruelty was calculated to make me feel unwelcome without giving me grounds to complain. She was building a case, gathering evidence for a verdict she'd already decided on. The first major incident happened during Tyler's 6th birthday party. I'd spent the entire morning decorating, making his favorite chocolate chip cookies from scratch, and wrapping the bicycle I'd bought him. When the guests arrived, Jessica swooped in like a vulture. "Oh, how sweet that Grandma tried to help," she told the other mothers, loud enough for me to hear. "Though we probably should have coordinated better. I'm just worried the cookies might be too sweet for the children." She said it with that perfect passive-aggressive smile, the one that made the other mothers nod sympathetically while I stood there holding my plate of cookies like an idiot. Later, I watched those same cookies disappear faster than evidence at a crime scene, but by then the damage was done. David missed the whole thing. He was in the backyard setting up the bounce house, completely oblivious to his wife's masterclass in social assassination. That night, after Tyler was asleep and David was snoring, I lay in my guest room staring at the ceiling and wondering how I'd become a stranger in what was supposed to be my new home. The walls felt like they were closing in, and not just because the room was barely bigger than a closet. But the worst part wasn't Jessica's behavior. It was watching my son become someone I didn't recognize. The David I'd raised would never have let anyone treat his mother the way Jessica treated me. This David just smiled and nodded, and kept the peace at any cost. I started making plans to leave. Maybe get a small apartment closer to downtown, somewhere I could rebuild some kind of life. I had the money. Robert had been a successful lawyer, and we'd been smart with our savings. I didn't need to depend on anyone. But then Tyler got sick with pneumonia and needed round-the-clock care. Jessica couldn't take time off work, and David was swamped with tax season. Suddenly, I wasn't the unwelcome house guest anymore. I was the essential caregiver. For 2 weeks, I barely left Tyler's side. I made him soup, read him stories, monitored his temperature, and slept in the chair next to his bed. When he finally turned the corner, the first thing he said was, "Don't leave, Grandma. I need you here." How could I walk away after that? So I stayed, and Jessica's resentment grew like mold in a damp basement. She'd found the perfect setup, a live-in babysitter and housekeeper who paid rent and couldn't fight back. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't as helpless as I looked. The second year was when Jessica's mask really started slipping. With Tyler in first grade and her confidence growing, she began treating me less like an unwelcome guest and more like hired help who forgot her place. "Margaret, could you pick up my dry cleaning? I'm running late for book club." Not a request, a command issued while she checked her manicure. The guest bathroom could use a deep clean. I noticed some soap scum when my mother visited last week. Delivered with the kind of smile that could freeze hell over. "Tyler's teacher wants to meet with his parents about his reading level. David and I will handle it, of course." The dismissal in her voice made it clear that I wasn't considered family anymore. Each slight was carefully crafted to remind me of my status in the household hierarchy. I was useful when they needed something, invisible when they didn't, and always, always expendable. The smart thing would have been to leave then, pack my bags, find my own place, and let them figure out their own childcare arrangements. But Tyler was thriving with me there, and I couldn't bear the thought of abandoning him to become a latchkey kid at 6 years old. Besides, I was starting to understand something important about Jessica. For all her calculated cruelty, she had one massive blind spot. She assumed everyone was as shallow and petty as she was. She looked at me and saw a grieving widow who had nowhere else to go. She had no idea who she was really dealing with. Robert hadn't just been any lawyer. He'd been one of the best real estate attorneys in the state. For 37 years, I'd sat at his side during client dinners, business meetings, and strategy sessions. I'd learned more about property law, contract negotiations, and financial leverage than most people learn in business school. But Jessica saw what she wanted to see, a lonely old woman desperate for family connection. It was almost insulting how little credit she gave me. The breaking point came during Tyler's school Christmas play. I'd helped him practice his lines for weeks, listened to him sing Silent Night in the bathtub until I could recite it backwards, and bought him the most adorable shepherd costume you've ever seen. The night of the performance, I was getting ready when Jessica appeared in my doorway. "Actually, Margaret, we won't have room in the car for you tonight. David's parents are coming, and it's really more of an immediate family thing anyway." She delivered this news while filing her nails, not even bothering to look at me. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, that would come later. This was something sharper, cleaner, recognition. "I see," I said quietly. "Well, I hope Tyler does well." "Oh, I'm sure he will. He's been practicing so hard." She finally looked up, and I saw the satisfaction in her eyes. She thought she'd won some sort of victory. Poor Jessica. She had no idea what she'd just started. That night, while they were at the play I'd helped prepare Tyler for, I sat in my room and made a decision. I was done being the grateful charity case. Done being treated like the hired help. Done watching my son choose his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity. It was time to remind everyone exactly who Margaret Thompson really was. Tyler's 8th birthday was supposed to be special. I'd been planning it for weeks, quietly coordinating with David about themes and guest lists and whether we should hire a clown or a magician. Tyler had been begging for a superhero party, complete with costumes and a cake shaped like a shield. "Can we invite my whole class, Grandma? And can you make those little sandwiches with the crusts cut off? And can we play superhero training in the backyard?" I'd said yes to everything, of course. What grandma could resist those big brown eyes and that gap-toothed grin? I'd already ordered the decorations, planned the menu, and even found a costume rental place that could provide capes for all the kids. But 3 days before the party, Jessica dropped her bombshell. "We've decided to have Tyler's party at Chuck E. Cheese instead," she announced over breakfast, not bothering to look up from her phone. "It's just easier than dealing with all the cleanup here." David nodded along like the bobblehead he'd become. "Yeah, Mom, it'll be less work for everyone. You can just relax and enjoy yourself." Tyler looked confused. But Grandma already ordered the superhero stuff, and she was going to make her special chocolate cake. "Chuck E. Cheese has perfectly good cake, sweetheart," Jessica said in that sugary voice she used when other people were listening. "And they have games. It'll be so much more fun than a boring home party." I watched my grandson's face fall. This was the kid who'd been drawing pictures of his superhero party for weeks, who'd practiced his training course in the backyard until he could run it with his eyes closed. But Jessica had decided, and David wasn't going to fight her. "That's fine," I said calmly, cutting my toast into precise squares. "I'm sure Tyler will have a wonderful time." Jessica shot me a sharp look, probably expecting more of a fight. But I'd learned my lesson about picking battles I couldn't win. This one, I'd win differently. "Actually," I continued, "I was thinking of taking a little trip that weekend anyway. Visit my sister in Portland. I haven't seen Helen in months." Complete lie. Helen lived in Florida and we talked twice a year. But I needed an excuse to be somewhere else when Jessica's perfectly planned party inevitably fell apart. "Oh." Jessica looked almost disappointed. "Well, if that's what you want to do." What I wanted to do was shake my son until his brain rattled back into place. But instead, I smiled and asked if anyone wanted more coffee. The morning of Tyler's birthday, I was up early making pancakes shaped like superhero symbols when Tyler shuffled into the kitchen in his pajamas. "Morning, birthday boy," I said, flipping a Batman pancake onto his plate. 8 years old. Can you believe it?" He climbed onto his stool and poked at the pancake with his fork. "Grandma, are you really going to miss my party?" My heart cracked right down the middle. "Oh, sweetie, I'm not missing it. I'll be thinking about you all day, and I want you to tell me about every single game you play, okay? But it won't be the same without you there." His voice was so small it nearly broke me. I knelt down next to his stool and took his hands in mine. "Tyler, listen to me. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make a lot of sense. But no matter what happens, no matter where I am, I will always, always love you. You understand that?" He nodded solemnly, and I kissed his forehead. Then I went upstairs to pack my overnight bag, even though I had no intention of going anywhere. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people get exactly what they ask for. The real party was supposed to start at 2 o'clock. By noon, I was packed and ready for my fictional trip to Portland, complete with suitcase by the door and printed MapQuest directions on the kitchen counter. Jessica was running around like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to get Tyler ready and coordinate pickup times with other parents. "David, did you remember to confirm the reservation? And we need to leave by 1:30 if we want to get there before the other kids." "Tyler, please go brush your teeth and put on your good shirt." I watched the chaos from my perch at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee and reading the newspaper like I didn't have a care in the world. Inside, I was counting down the minutes. At 12:30, my phone rang. "Is this Mrs. Thompson? This is Cheryl from Chuck E. Cheese. I'm so sorry to call last minute, but we've had a kitchen fire and we're going to be closed for the rest of the weekend." I schooled my expression into concern, while Jessica turned 3 shades of pale. "Oh my goodness, is everyone okay?" "Everyone's fine, thank you. We tried calling the number on the reservation, but it went straight to voicemail." I glanced over at David, who was frantically checking his phone. "Dead battery," he muttered. Jessica was spiraling. "But what are we supposed to do? The kids will be here in an hour. I already told all the parents." "I'm sure you'll figure something out," I said gently, standing up and checking my watch. "I really should get on the road before traffic gets bad." "But Mom," We need help. David looked genuinely panicked. Can't you postpone your trip? I tilted my head thoughtfully, as if I was really considering it. Well, I suppose I could call Helen and reschedule. Jessica's jaw was so tight I thought she might crack a tooth. She knew she needed me, but asking would be admitting that all her careful planning had been useless. Pride and desperation warred across her face like a nature documentary. Finally, Tyler made the decision for her. Please don't go, Grandma. We can still have the superhero party, right? You still have all the decorations. And there it was. The moment I'd been waiting for. Oh, sweetheart, I don't know. Your mom and dad already decided on Chuck E. Cheese. I wouldn't want to interfere with their plans. Jessica looked like she was swallowing glass. Maybe we could combine both ideas. Have the party here but still make it fun like Chuck E. Cheese. I pretended to consider this. I suppose that could work, though we'd need to completely redecorate, and I'd have to make the cake from scratch, and we'd need to set up activities for 12 8-year-olds with about 30 minutes notice. Can you do it? David asked hopefully. I smiled at my son. Really smiled. For the first time in months. David, honey, I've been throwing parties since before you were born. The question isn't whether I can do it. The question is whether you want me to. What followed was the most satisfying hour of my life. While Jessica stood in the corner trying not to have a nervous breakdown, I transformed their sterile modern living room into superhero headquarters. I had David hanging streamers while I whipped up a 3-layer chocolate cake with buttercream frosting. Tyler helped me set up the obstacle course in the backyard, chattering excitedly about how this was going to be the best party ever. By the time the first kids arrived, you'd never have known we'd thrown the whole thing together last minute. The house looked amazing, the cake was perfect, and Tyler was glowing with excitement. But Jessica's humiliation was just getting started. As parents dropped off their kids, they kept complimenting the decorations, asking for my cake recipe, and telling Tyler how lucky he was to have such a creative grandmother. Jessica stood there smiling tightly and accepting praise for a party she'd nearly destroyed. "This is incredible," said Tyler's teacher, Mrs. Patterson. "You must have been planning this for weeks." "Oh, well, it was really a team effort," Jessica managed, while I bit back a laugh. The real kicker came when Tyler blew out his candles. Instead of making a wish for toys or games, he stood up on his chair and announced to the whole party, "I wish my grandma could live with us forever and ever because she makes everything better." The room erupted in awes from the other parents, and Tyler launched himself into my arms for the biggest hug of his life. Over his shoulder, I caught Jessica's eye. She looked like she wanted to murder me. Perfect. The party was a complete success. Tyler glowed like a little light bulb for hours, running around in his cape and showing off his superhero training course to anyone who would watch. The other kids had a blast. The parents raved about everything from the decorations to the homemade cake, and even David seemed to remember why he used to be proud of his mother. But Jessica's mood got darker with every compliment. "Your mother-in-law is amazing," I heard one mom say to her. "Tyler is so lucky to have her." "Margaret really outdid herself," said another. "This is so much better than Chuck E. Cheese." By the time the last guest left, Jessica was practically vibrating with rage. She'd spent the entire party watching me get credit for saving the day she'd nearly ruined, and it was eating her alive. Tyler was exhausted but happy, crashing on the couch with his pile of presents while David cleaned up cups and plates. I was boxing up leftover cake when Jessica finally cornered me in the kitchen. "That was quite a performance," she said quietly, making sure the others couldn't hear. I looked up from my Tupperware, genuinely confused. "I'm sorry. Don't play innocent with me, Margaret. You orchestrated this whole thing. The Chuck E. Cheese cancellation, the last-minute party, playing the hero grandmother." Her voice was low and vicious. "I don't know how you did it, but I know you did." I set down the cake box and looked at her calmly. "Jessica, are you suggesting I somehow caused a kitchen fire at a children's restaurant just to make you look bad?" When she put it like that, it did sound pretty crazy, but Jessica was beyond rational thought at this point. "I'm suggesting you've been playing games since the day you moved in here, acting all helpless and grateful while you slowly turn my family against me." "Your family?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. "Yes, my family. David is my husband, Tyler is my son, and this is my house. You're just the guest who forgot when to leave. Something cold and sharp settled behind my ribs. I'd put up with a lot over the past 3 years. The casual cruelty, the deliberate exclusion, the constant reminders of my place in the hierarchy. But calling Tyler her son was the line I didn't even know existed until she crossed it. You're right, I said softly. This is your house, and you're absolutely right that I've forgotten my place. Jessica looked surprised by my sudden agreement, but she pressed her advantage. I'm glad we understand each other. Because honestly, Margaret, I think it's time we all faced facts. You've been here 3 years now, and it's not working out. You need your own space, your own life. It's not healthy for any of us to keep pretending this arrangement is permanent. I nodded thoughtfully, wiping down the counter with slow, deliberate strokes. You know what, Jessica? You're absolutely right. It's time I stopped pretending. She looked relieved, probably thinking she'd finally worn me down. I'm so glad you see it that way. We can start looking at apartments for you next week, help you get settled somewhere nice. Oh, I don't think that will be necessary, I said, hanging up the dish towel. I already know exactly where I'm going to live. Something in my tone made her pause. Where? I smiled at her. Really smiled, the way I used to smile at opposing counsel when I knew I had them cornered. Right here. Her face went blank with confusion. What do you mean right here? I just told you. Jessica, sweetie, I said, my voice gentle as silk. There's something I should probably mention. When David and Tyler and I were planning this party, we talked about a lot of things, including some interesting facts about property ownership. I paused, genuinely reflecting on the day's events. You know, when Chuck E. Cheese called about that kitchen fire, I was as shocked as anyone. What are the odds? But maybe sometimes the universe just has a sense of timing. The color was starting to drain from her face. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that this house, this beautiful house that you love so much, isn't actually yours. I leaned against the counter, perfectly relaxed. It's mine. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, trying to process what I'd just said. That's impossible, she whispered. Is it? See, when Robert died, I inherited quite a few properties. This house was one of them. I've been letting David and you live here rent-free for the past 5 years, ever since you got married. I thought it was a nice wedding gift. I paused, letting that sink in. But I'm starting to think I've been too generous. Jessica's hands were shaking now. David never said. David doesn't know. The deed is in a trust Robert set up, managed by his old law firm. I never bothered to mention it because I never thought I'd need to. I straightened up, and something in my posture must have changed, because Jessica actually took a step back. But you know what, Jessica? After today's little heart-to-heart, I think it's time to clarify some things about whose house this really is. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Finally, she managed to croak out, "You're lying." I pulled my phone out of my pocket and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Let's find out, shall we? And that's when I made the phone call that changed everything. The phone rang twice before Robert's old law partner picked up. Mitchell, Harrison and Associates, this is James Mitchell. James, it's Margaret Thompson. I hope I'm not calling too late. Margaret, never too late for you. How are you holding up, dear? I kept my eyes on Jessica, who was standing frozen in the middle of my kitchen like a deer caught in headlights. I'm doing very well, actually. Listen, I need you to send over the ownership documents for the Maple Street property. Tonight, if possible. The Maple Street house? Of course. Is everything all right? Everything's perfect. I just need to clarify some property rights for my family. You know how these things can get complicated. Jessica's face had gone from pale to green. She was finally understanding that this wasn't some elaborate bluff. I'll email the documents within the hour, James said. Do you need anything else? Just the current deed and the trust documentation. Oh, and James, could you also send over the rental market analysis you did last month? I'm thinking of making some changes to the property management. Jessica actually swayed on her feet. Market analysis meant I was serious about this. Market analysis meant eviction notices and moving trucks, and the complete destruction of her perfect little life. Absolutely. I'll include the comparable properties in the area. You should know, Margaret, the house has appreciated significantly since Robert's passing. You could command quite a premium on the current market. That's excellent news. Thank you, James. I hung up and slipped my phone back into my pocket, never taking my eyes off Jessica. She was staring at me like I'd just sprouted horns and a tail. You can't do this, she whispered. Actually, I can do whatever I want. It's my house. I started loading dirty plates into the dishwasher, humming softly. But don't worry, Jessica. I'm not unreasonable. I'll give you 30 days' notice, just like any other tenant. 30 days? But we have nowhere to go. David's job, Tyler's school. Probably should have thought of that before you decided to kick me out of my own home. I paused, holding a plate up to check for spots. What was it you said earlier? Pack your bags, old hag. Such lovely language for a lady. David chose that moment to walk into the kitchen, Tyler trailing behind him with chocolate cake smeared on his chin. Mom, thanks again for saving the day. That was incredible. He wrapped me in a hug that felt genuine for the first time in months. I don't know what we would have done without you. I patted his back gently. Oh, sweetheart, you would have figured something out. You always do. Jessica was staring at us with wild eyes, probably trying to figure out how to explain to her husband that they were about to be homeless. But I wasn't done with my little performance yet. David, could you take Tyler upstairs and get him ready for his bath? All that cake and running around, he needs a good scrub before bed. Sure thing. Come on, birthday boy, let's get you cleaned up. Once they were gone, I turned back to Jessica with a smile that could have cut glass. Now then. Where were we? Jessica found her voice somewhere between fury and panic. You evil witch! You've been planning this all along, haven't you? I laughed, actually laughed, because the irony was just too perfect. Planning what, exactly? Planning to be treated with basic human decency in my own home? Planning to not be called an old hag on my grandson's birthday? Honey, if that's evil planning, then I'm guilty as charged. David will never let you do this. When he finds out what? That his mother owns the house he's been living in, rent-free for 5 years? That she's been supporting his family financially, while his wife treated her like garbage? I closed the dishwasher with a gentle click. Oh, I think David's going to be very interested in this conversation. Jessica's whole body was trembling now. You don't understand. We can't move. David's building his practice here, Tyler has friends, we have a life. Had a life, I corrected. Past tense. You killed it about 20 minutes ago when you decided to remind me of my place in the hierarchy. The sound of footsteps on the stairs sent Jessica into full panic mode. She grabbed my arm with both hands, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin. Please, she whispered. I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. We can work this out. I looked down at her hands on my arm, then back up at her face. Let go of me, Jessica. She dropped her hands like I was on fire, just as David walked back into the kitchen. Tyler's in the bath, he announced, then stopped short when he saw our faces. Is everything okay? You both look... We're fine, Jessica said quickly. Just discussing some household things. David looked between us suspiciously. He might have been oblivious to the daily warfare in his own home, but he wasn't stupid. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Actually, David, I said casually, I was just telling Jessica about some paperwork I received from James Mitchell today, about this house. Paperwork? David frowned. What kind of paperwork? Jessica made a small sound like a wounded animal, but I ignored her. Property documentation, deed transfers, trust information, that sort of thing. Turns out there were some details about this house that we never really discussed. What details? I pulled out my phone and showed him the email that had just arrived from James. Why don't you read this for yourself? David took the phone and started scrolling through the attachment. I watched his face change as he read. Confusion, then surprise, then something that might have been embarrassment. Mom, he said slowly, this says you own this house. I do. But how is that possible? We bought this house when Jessica and I got married. I tilted my head. Did you? Do you have a mortgage? Did you sign closing papers? David's mouth opened and closed several times. Well, the down payment came from you, but I thought... Jessica always handled all the financial paperwork, the insurance documents, everything. She said it was easier for her to manage since she worked part-time. He turned to look at his wife, who had backed herself against the refrigerator like she was trying to disappear into it. Jessica? What's going on here? She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. What could she say? That she'd known all along they were living in my house? That she'd been treating the homeowner like an unwelcome guest for 3 years? That she'd just tried to evict me from my own property? The truth is, David, I said gently, when you two got engaged, your father and I wanted to help you start your marriage on solid ground. So we bought this house as a wedding gift. The deed went into the trust to simplify the tax implications. A wedding gift, David repeated slowly. We figured you'd never accept it if we just handed you the keys, so we let you think you were buying it yourselves. We covered the down payment, the closing costs, everything. Your mortgage payments have just been going into a savings account for Tyler's college fund. David sank into one of the kitchen chairs like someone had cut his strings. My God! All this time you've been living in your mother's house, I finished. Which brings us to tonight's conversation. His head snapped up. What conversation? I smiled at my son with all the love I'd been holding back for 3 years. The one where Jessica told me to pack my bags and get out. On your son's birthday, in my own home. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the dishwasher cycling through its rinse phase. David looked at his wife with an expression I'd never seen before, like he was seeing her for the first time and didn't like what he was looking at. Jessica, he said quietly, please tell me you didn't actually say that. And that's when Jessica made the biggest mistake of her life. Instead of apologizing, instead of showing even a hint of remorse, Jessica went on the attack. Don't you dare sit there and judge me, David. I've been dealing with your mother undermining me for 3 years. She waltzed in here and took over everything. My kitchen, my household, my son. Your son? David's voice was dangerously quiet. You know what I mean. She acts like Tyler is more hers than mine. She's always swooping in to save the day, making me look incompetent in my own home. Her own home, David corrected. I didn't know that, Jessica screamed. How was I supposed to know she was keeping secrets about who owns what? I watched this meltdown with fascination. Jessica was doing something I'd learned never to do in Robert's courtroom. She was digging herself deeper instead of cutting her losses. And another thing, she continued, pointing an accusatory finger at me. She's been playing games this whole time. The Chuck E. Cheese cancellation, the last-minute party, making herself look like the hero while I look like an idiot. David turned to me with raised eyebrows. Did you somehow cancel the Chuck E. Cheese reservation? Of course not, I said truthfully. I'm not a magician, David. Sometimes restaurants just have kitchen fires. Jessica laughed bitterly. Oh, how convenient. Everything always works out perfectly for St. Margaret. You're right, I agreed. It was convenient. Almost like the universe was trying to tell you something about treating people badly. That's when Jessica really lost it. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of pretending to be grateful for your precious presence in our lives. You want to know the truth? I've hated having you here from day one. You're controlling, manipulative, and you've turned my husband and son against me. David stood up so fast, his chair fell over. That's enough. No, it's not enough. I want her out. I don't care whose name is on what piece of paper. This is my family and my life, and I want her gone. The kitchen went dead silent, except for the sound of Tyler's voice floating down from upstairs, singing some silly song in the bathtub. Innocent and happy, completely unaware that his world was about to change forever. David looked at his wife like he'd never seen her before. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear him. Jessica, 3 hours ago, my mother saved my son's birthday party. She turned what could have been a disaster into the best day of Tyler's year. And instead of saying thank you, you told her to pack her bags and leave. She manipulated the whole thing. She baked a cake from scratch and decorated our house in 30 minutes while you stood in the corner having a panic attack. David's voice was getting louder now. And even if she did somehow orchestrate the whole thing, which is insane. By the way, she did it to make our son happy. Jessica's face was red and blotchy with rage. Your son. He's always your son when it's convenient, isn't he? Just like this is suddenly your mother's house when she wants to throw her weight around. This has always been my mother's house. We just didn't know it. David ran his hands through his hair. God, Jessica, how did I not see this? The way you talk to her, the way you treat her like she's some kind of burden. She is a burden. An old woman who can't let go and move on with her life. That was the moment David's patience finally snapped. Get out. Jessica blinked. What? I said get out. Right now, before I say something I can't take back. You can't be serious. This is my home. No, David said firmly. It's not. It never was. And after what you just said about my mother, after the way you've been treating her, he shook his head. I need you to leave, tonight. Jessica turned to me with desperate eyes. Margaret, please, tell him this is all a misunderstanding. You know I didn't mean it. I looked at this woman who had made my life miserable for 3 years, who had tried to exile me from my own home, who had just called me a manipulative burden in front of my son. And I smiled. Oh, but Jessica, I said sweetly, I think you meant every word. The look of betrayal on her face was almost worth 3 years of casual cruelty. Almost. David, you can't seriously be taking her side over mine. I'm your wife. You're the woman who just told my mother, in her own house, to pack her bags and leave on our son's birthday. David's voice was cold as January. Right now, I'm not sure what that makes you. Jessica looked between us wildly, like a cornered animal searching for an escape route. This is insane. You're both insane. I'm calling my mother. Good idea, I said. Maybe she has a spare room. Jessica's hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. But before she could dial, Tyler's voice echoed down the stairs. Daddy, I need help. The soap got in my eyes. David looked torn between his parental duties and the crisis unfolding in his kitchen. I touched his arm gently. Go help Tyler. Jessica and I can finish our conversation like adults. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. This isn't over, he told his wife before heading upstairs. The moment we were alone, Jessica dropped her phone and grabbed my arm again. Please, she whispered. I know I said terrible things, but I was upset. You ambushed me with that property information. You have to understand how shocking it was. I looked down at her manicured fingers on my sleeve. Jessica, I want you to think very carefully about your next words, because what you say in the next 30 seconds is going to determine whether you leave here tonight with David's respect intact or whether you leave here with nothing at all. She let go of my arm and stepped back. For the first time since I'd known her, Jessica looked genuinely frightened. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. Jessica, I want you to think very carefully about your next words, because what you say in the next 30 seconds is going to determine whether you leave here tonight with David's respect intact or whether you leave here with nothing at all. She let go of my arm and stepped back. For the first time since I'd known her, Jessica looked genuinely frightened. What do you mean? I showed her the recording that had been running since she started her tirade about hating me. I started recording when you began screaming about how much you despise having me here. Let me refresh your memory. Jessica's eyes went wide as I hit the playback button. Her own voice filled the kitchen. I'm sick of pretending to be grateful for your precious presence in our lives. You want to know the truth? I've hated having you here from day one. I stopped the recording and slipped the phone back into my pocket. I mean that I have 3 years of documentation about how you've treated me. Tonight's little outburst was just the grand finale. Jessica's face went white. You recorded me without my consent. That's illegal. Actually, it's not. This is a one-party consent state, and I was part of the conversation. Any lawyer would tell you the same thing. I smiled. But thank you for reminding me that I used to be married to one of the best attorneys in the state. I picked up a few things over the years. You wouldn't actually use that against me, wouldn't I? Jessica, you just spent 10 minutes screaming about how much you hate me, how you want me out of your life, and how Tyler is more your son than mine. In front of his father. In my own home. I shrugged. I think a family court judge would find that very interesting during custody hearings. The blood drained from her face so fast, I thought she might faint. Custody hearings? Oh, did I not mention? David's going to divorce you. Probably not tonight, probably not even next week, but it's going to happen. You crossed a line you can't uncross. I leaned against the counter, perfectly calm. The question is whether he keeps Tyler or whether you get shared custody. And honestly, after tonight's performance, I'm not sure how that's going to go. Jessica sank into David's abandoned chair like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. This can't be happening. It is happening. But here's the thing, Jessica. I'm not actually a monster. Despite what you think of me, I don't want Tyler to grow up without his mother. So I'm going to make you an offer. She looked up at me with desperate hope. What offer? You leave tonight. Quietly, with dignity, and without making a scene that traumatizes my grandson. You tell David you need some time to think about what happened tonight, and you go stay with your mother or a friend or wherever you go when you need space. And then what? And then you get some therapy. Real therapy. Not just someone to validate your feelings. You figure out why you turned into someone who could treat a grieving widow like garbage for 3 years. You work on yourself until you become someone David might actually want to stay married to. Jessica stared at me. You think there's a chance? I think David loves you. Or at least he loves the woman he married. But that woman isn't who you've become. If you can find your way back to her, if you can genuinely change. I shrugged. Maybe there's hope. And if I don't leave quietly? My smile turned sharp enough to cut steel. Then I play that recording for David, for Tyler's school counselor, for your book club friends, and for anyone else who wants to know what kind of person you really are. And when the divorce proceedings start, I make sure everyone knows exactly how you treated the woman who opened her home to you. Jessica was crying now, silent tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. Why are you giving me a choice? I thought about that for a moment. Because Tyler deserves better than a bitter custody battle. Because David deserves a chance to heal. And because I paused, surprised by my own honesty. Because despite everything you've done to me, I still believe people can change. Even you. Footsteps on the stairs warned us that David was coming back. Jessica wiped her face quickly and stood up. I need to pack some things, she said quietly. That's probably a good idea. She started toward the doorway, then stopped and turned back to me. Margaret, I really am sorry, really am. About tonight, about everything. I studied her face, looking for the lie, but for the first time in 3 years, Jessica looked genuinely remorseful. I know you are, I said softly. The question is whether you're sorry enough to actually change. She nodded and headed upstairs, passing David on his way down. He looked between the empty kitchen and the sound of Jessica's footsteps above us. Where's she going? I handed him a cup of coffee and settled into my chair. She's packing a bag. I think she needs some time to think about what happened tonight. David sat down across from me, looking older than his 36 years. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she felt that way about you. I should have seen it, should have said something. Oh, sweetheart, I said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. You can't protect everyone from everything. Sometimes people have to reveal who they really are before the healing can begin. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of Tyler's bedtime routine overhead. Finally, David looked up at me with eyes that reminded me so much of his father. What happens now? I smiled at my son, my dear, oblivious, well-meaning son, who was finally starting to see clearly. Now, I said. Now we figure out how to be a family again. 6 months later, I was in my garden planting roses when Tyler came running around the corner of the house, his school backpack bouncing on his shoulders. Grandma, guess what happened at school today? I set down my trowel and brushed the dirt off my hands. What happened, sweetheart? Mrs. Patterson says I'm reading at a 5th grade level. And Marcus invited me to his birthday party next weekend, and he paused for breath. And Mom called Dad during lunch. My hands stilled on the gardening gloves I was pulling off. Oh? And how did that go? Tyler's face scrunched up thoughtfully. Dad looked happy when he hung up, but also kind of sad. Is that weird? Not weird at all, baby. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings about things. Jessica had been gone for 6 months now, living with her sister in Denver and attending therapy twice a week. She called Tyler every few days and had visited twice, staying in a hotel downtown and taking him for carefully supervised day trips. David had filed for separation, but not divorce. Not yet. They were all taking things one day at a time. Is Mom coming to my soccer game on Saturday? Tyler asked, plopping down in the grass next to my flower bed. I don't know, sweetheart. You'll have to ask your dad when he gets home. The truth was, Jessica had been asking to come to more and more of Tyler's activities. Her therapist had apparently told her that rebuilding trust meant showing up consistently for the small things, not just the big gestures. It was progress, I supposed, though I wasn't entirely convinced it would last. But Tyler was happier than I'd seen him in years. Without the constant tension between his parents, he'd blossomed like a flower, finally getting enough sunlight. His grades were better, he'd made new friends, and he'd started calling this house home instead of Mom and Dad's house. David was a different story. He was a good father, working hard to give Tyler stability and normalcy, but I could see the loneliness eating at him. Some nights I'd find him sitting in the living room after Tyler went to bed, just staring at his wedding ring like it held answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. "Grandma?" Tyler's voice pulled me back to the present. "Are you sad that Mom doesn't live here anymore?" I considered the question carefully. Was I sad? Jessica's absence had brought peace to our household, but it had also brought David's heartbreak and Tyler's confusion. The victory I'd thought I wanted felt more complicated now. "I'm sad that our family got broken," I said finally. "But sometimes things have to break before they can heal properly." Tyler nodded solemnly. "Like when I broke my arm and the doctor had to re-break it to set the bone right?" "Exactly like that. Do you think our family will heal right?" I looked at this serious little boy who'd been through more upheaval in 6 months than most kids faced in years, and I felt my heart squeeze tight. "I think our family is going to be exactly what it's supposed to be," I said. "It might not look the same as it did before, but that doesn't mean it won't be beautiful." The sound of David's car in the driveway sent Tyler scrambling to his feet. "Dad's home. I have to tell him about my reading level." He raced toward the front of the house, leaving me alone with my roses and my thoughts. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 3 years feeling like an outsider in my own home, and now that it truly was my home again, I sometimes wondered if I'd won the right battle. My phone buzzed with a text message. James Mitchell, probably with some legal update about the property trust. But when I opened it, the message wasn't from James. It was from Jessica. "Margaret, I know I have no right to ask this, but could we talk? Not about David or custody or coming home. Just, could we talk? I think I owe you more than an apology." I stared at the message for a long time, listening to Tyler's excited chatter from the front yard and David's warm laughter in response. 6 months ago, I would have deleted the message without responding. 6 months ago, I was focused on winning. But sitting in my garden with dirt under my fingernails and the smell of roses in the air, I realized something important. I'd already won. I had my home, my son's respect, and my grandson's love. Jessica couldn't take any of that away from me anymore. What she was asking for now wasn't surrender or negotiation. It was grace. I typed back, "Saturday at 2 p.m., the coffee shop on Main Street." Her response came immediately. "Thank you." Tyler came bounding back around the corner, dragging David behind him. "Dad wants to see your roses," Tyler announced. "I told him they're the prettiest ones in the whole neighborhood." David smiled at me over Tyler's head. "I hear you've been working miracles out here." I looked around at my garden. Neat rows of vegetables, carefully tended flower beds, fruit trees that were finally starting to produce. It had taken months of patient work, pulling weeds and enriching soil and learning which plants thrived in which conditions. "Not miracles," I said. "Just time and attention and the willingness to start over when something isn't working." David's eyes met mine with understanding. He knew I wasn't just talking about gardening. "Maybe you could teach me," he said. "I think I'd like to learn how to grow something beautiful." I handed him my extra pair of gardening gloves and smiled. "I'd love to teach you. We have all the time in the world." And in my garden, surrounded by my family and the flowers I'd planted with my own hands, I finally understood what victory really looked like. It wasn't about defeating Jessica or proving my worth or getting my way. It was about this: my grandson's laughter, my son's trust, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, when you stand your ground and refuse to let people make you smaller than you are, the universe has a way of making things right. The roses I'd planted that day would bloom for years to come, and so would we. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.